Hi, welcome to our series on paragraph writing. First of all, we're going to define a paragraph, and we're going to define it in terms of being an art, which means it has structure, it has design, and in that design are detail. But we'll start with the definition of a paragraph. A paragraph is a unit of discourse, which is a treatise, a dissertation, an address to an audience or a person or a group that develops a single idea. This is huge right here, developing a single idea. A paragraph consists of a series of sentences, a group or series of sentences, and they're closely related to one another and to the thought expressed by the whole paragraph. Like the sentence, a good paragraph, like an essay, a good paragraph, is a complete treatment in itself. If we look at any well-written passage of English prose, we'll see that it's not a haphazard collection of miscellaneous ideas or observations, but it's an orderly presentation of thought. Every sentence does its share of work towards making the meaning clear. By breaking down a passage into its basic parts, we'll see exactly what the work of each part is. So let's take a look at a couple examples. This is what's called an isolated paragraph. It's not part of a longer dissertation or part of a group of paragraphs, but it's its own treatment of one topic. And that allows us to look at the one thought embodied in it. The thought and the theme of this passage is the annihilation of an army. So these are color-coded by individual sentences which in themselves serve as topics that all work together to explain the annihilation of an army. And we're going to look at this more closely in the next slide. But it's color-coded, and these are grouped according to the thoughts that each group is trying to contribute to the annihilation of an army. So if we break down this paragraph, and even though there's white space, it's one paragraph, we'll see that the author, McCarthy, had 4 different points he's making to explain the annihilation of an army. And the way the passage divides is into 4 stages. He's divided them into stages in the annihilation. And each stage is distinct, has its own work in making clear the one thought of the whole passage, which again is the annihilation of an army. So he says, "Then the march of the army without a general went on again. Soon it became the story of a general without an army, and before long there was neither general nor army. It is idle to lengthen a tale of mere horrors." The second group talks about the Jugdulluk Pass being a trap. So it says, "The straggling remnant of an army entered the Jugdulluk Pass, a dark, steep, narrow, ascending path between crags. The miserable toilers found that the fanatical, implacable tribes had barricaded the pass. All was over." This is like a summary of what came before. "The army of Kabul was finally extinguished in that barricaded pass. It was a trap. The British were taken in it. The pass." And if you look at this, he's referring to the group that's left, calling them a straggling remnant, and he says they entered. Here, the straggling remnant is called the miserable toilers, and they found. There's kind of a parallelism to these 2 sentences, which means the structure or the syntax of this sentence is very similar to this one, but he's referring back to the straggling remnant. He said they entered the pass. Now he's going to talk about what happened when they entered. They found a barricade that had been set up by the tribes. And then they summarize and say all was over. It says the army of Kabul. So straggling remnant, miserable toilers, army of Kabul, all referring to the same group, was finally extinguished in that barricaded pass. It was a trap. Another summary sentence. And then the British were taken in that trap, or in it. The third part talks about the few fugitives being reduced to 1. So he says a few mere fugitives escaped from the scene of actual slaughter and were on the road to Jalalabad, where Sale and his little army were holding their own. Then, when they were within 16 miles of Jalalabad, the number was reduced to 6. Of these 6, 5 were killed by straggling marauders on the way, and then one man alone reached Jalalabad to tell the tale. So here's another stage where they're reduced to 6 and then 1. The last part talks about the one man that reached Jalalabad. Literally, one man, Dr. Brydon, came to Jalalabad out of a moving host which had numbered in all some 16,000. So 16,000 soldiers and one survivor. The curious eye will search through history or fiction in vain for any picture more thrilling with the suggestion of an awful catastrophe than that of this solitary survivor, faint and reeling on his jaded horse, as he appeared under the walls of Jalalabad to bear the tidings of our Thermopylae of pain and shame. And here is the link talking about the Battle of Thermopylae. But the whole point of this is to show that a paragraph has a structure and a design, and within that structure and design are details. Here's another pretty famous, you can look him up on the internet, and this author, J. Cotter Morrison, is crediting Macaulay with developing the historical essay. All of these sentences make up one paragraph, and the breakdown of this passage is by thought. So the previous one was by stages, and this paragraph is broken down by thought. His 4 main points are that Macaulay gave to the historical essay originality of form and treatment, that forms of historical writing before Macaulay consisted of X, Y, and Z. Then he talks about what Macaulay's originality consisted of. And finally, he says his essays are the best of their class. So let's look at this a little more closely. The analysis, again, is by thought divisions. So Macaulay gave to the historical essay originality of form and treatment. He didn't invent it, he improved it greatly, and he found it rudimentary and left it complete. The way these points are set up is like a climax. It's a figure of speech that's used to develop a sentence, but it can also be applied to paragraphs and whole essays. So invent, improved, completed. And 2 of these sentences on how he improved it are set up like parallel cases in that the syntax of each of these credits are identical, and that's considered a parallel form, and we'll look into that much more extensively later. So he says the originality of form and treatment which Macaulay gave to the historical essay has not perhaps received due recognition. Without having invented it, he so greatly improved and expanded it that he deserves nearly as much credit as if he had invented it. He did for the historical essay what Haydn did for the sonata and Watt for the steam engine. He found it rudimentary and unimportant and left it complete and a thing of power. Then he talks about forms of historical writing before Macaulay. Ponderous history, dissertation, review. Before his time there was the ponderous history, generally in quarto, and there was the antiquarian dissertation. There was also the historical review, containing alternate pages of extract and comment, generally dull and gritty. But the historical essay, as he conceived it, and with the prompt inspiration of a real discoverer, immediately put into practical shape what was as good as unknown before him. In what consisted of the originality of treatment. So he talks about those points, and these are the points. He selected effective points in periods and people. To take a bright period or personage of history, he framed it and frame it in a firm outline, and to conceive it at once in article size, and then to fill in this limited canvas with sparkling anecdote, telling bits of color and facts all fused together by a real genius for narrative, was the sort of genre painting which Macaulay applied to history. And finally, his essays are the best of their class, and to this day his essays remain the best of their class. Others surpass them in erudition and critical research, not only in England but in Europe. Slight or even trivial in the field of historical erudition, which is learnedness or sophistication, and critical inquiry, they are masterpieces if regarded in the light of great popular cartoons on subjects taken from modern history. They have a monopoly of the periods and characters treated by them. They are painted indeed with such freedom, vividness, and power that they may be said to enjoy a sort of tacit monopoly of the periods and characters to which they refer, in the estimation of the general public. So, as I stated, the point of this particular video is to show that paragraphs have structure. Not only is there a structure from the topic sentence and sentences that back it up. Each one of those sentences can be expanded or amplified on, and that would make up one whole thought, all contributing to the main thought. And that each paragraph can be divided by different divisions. In the previous one, we saw it was by stages, and in this one, by thought divisions. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next slide.